have a testimony here I would like to provide. Living in public housing can feel like living in the embassy of a foreign country, but instead of diplomatic immunity, we are centered in political and bureaucratic crosshairs. We are hunted, not helped, for the billions our presence brings into this system. That's not a punchline, it's policy and it's practice. This report by the Department of Investigation shows what we already know because we live it. The guards left, the doors fell, the cameras didn't work, fires happened, and NYCHA said nothing, did nothing. But while it's easy and even convenient to beat up on NYCHA, let's not ignore the other failure happening right here. This report never mentions our rights, not once. It talks about contracts, it talks about staffing, but it says nothing about how residents were excluded from the process, from oversight, from partnership, even though federal law requires it. Under 24 CFR 964-135, we are supposed to be included in operations. Under 105, we are supposed to help shape policy. Under 11, we are supposed to be equal partners in protecting the homes we live in. But NYCHA treats those rights like fine print, and DOI didn't even read them. Not in the findings, not even in the recommendations. This is a failure, not just of NYCHA, but of the DOI and the city. Because this isn't the first time residents' rights were ignored. Last year, 70 people were arrested in a raid tied to NYCHA, micro contracts. The report said nothing about how those events could have been prevented if residents' economic rights had been respected, monitored, and enforced. The law says residents should have been involved in contract oversight, in shaping policy, in the reviewing of how money moves, and if we had been, that raid never would have happened. This isn't just a failure of security, it's a failure of recognition. We are not correctional facility inmates, but that's how NYCHA treats us. The cameras we live under, 20,000 of them, aren't used to protect our rights or enforce housing policies. They're used by the NYPD. That tells you everything about how NYCHA sees us, not as neighbors, not as retirees, not as working families, but as threats, as cases to be managed, as noise to be contained. The real crisis isn't just that guards left their post, it's that we were never invited to stand at the post with them. If NYCHA had honored our federally mandated right to partnership, this failure wouldn't have lasted 5 years. It would have ended in 5 minutes. So yes, this report is a start, but it doesn't name our rights. If it doesn't censor resident participation, if it doesn't examine how government intentionally excludes the people it is required to serve, then it's just paperwork with a headline. We are not guests in this system. We are the backbones of it. And we will not sit quietly while you audit the contracts, ignore the people. Thank you.
Just a couple of questions, and thank you for your advocacy, Mr. Martinez. Pertaining to community engagement, what level of community engagement are you familiar with when it comes to the security guards or the fire guards, particularly as a leader of public housing?
When it comes to community engagement in that regard, there's zero. Right. So you'll have resident council officers who represent the community who may say something to the local management. That report then gets muffled by department compartmentalization, because one department has to speak to another department, has to speak to another, and it gets lost in the jumble. And so it's obstructed right from the start.
If you were to give a recommendation, because I know we got recommendations from DOI, if you were to give a recommendation as a NYCHA leader and a resident, what recommendation would you give?
First, they have to make sure that every step of the process, as the law requires, that we are included. From contracting, who is being contracted with, and the expectations of those contracts and what is happening. They should also provide summaries of what's going on to us, at least on a quarterly basis, of what has been responded. And lastly, they need to start using their resources, such as the 20,000 cameras, to enforce housing policy and to put stronger priorities on the compliance of residents' rights.
When it comes to local hiring as well, do you think that that's something that they should engage the residents on? I mean, I know that's a Section 3 requirement, And would it make a difference if local residents were also in these positions?
It would make a huge difference because you have local residents who care about their communities. Currently, NYCHA has a policy in which they don't allow their own NYCHA employees who live in NYCHA work in the developments they're at. And we think that that's a huge failure. That signifies a gross mistrust of the residents that they're supposed to serve and who works for them, instead of them upholding compliance and securing that people are doing their jobs.
Would you agree? Last year we had a bitter fight to make sure that we preserved and protect the $6.8 million for this particular security program, and to really to pay these contracts, or this contract. Would you agree that this is a slap in the face to the residents of public housing who came out, especially the seniors who came out, or I'll call them the younger adults who came out and said, we need the security apparatus. This is a lifeline for us. Would you agree that this is a slap in the face to all of those folks who need this particular service, and thought that we were doing the right thing?
Yes, but more than that, it signifies a conditioning that has happened in our communities, right? So our wiser population, our elderly who we look up to, who are constantly used by NYCHA when it comes to the need for funding, but then excluded when it comes into the execution of their safety, security, and actual what is supposed to be happening through it. It is a symbol that this decades-long tradition or habitual action that this agency, as well as the city on a larger scale, has taken for this particular community. It's okay for us to fight for the funds, but it's not. It's overlooked when it's time to make sure that those funds are used correctly.
And this is my last question, and goes back to community engagement. Were you ever aware of any situation where NYCHA asks for feedback on contractors' work?
Never. Actually, I have demanded that very same issue, to which they ignored and denied.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, sir.
We will now have Commissioner Jocelyn Strawberry. Thank you. You may swear her in.
Hi, good morning. If you could just raise your right hand, please. And do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to all council member questions?
I do.
Thanks. You may proceed when you're ready.
Is this microphone on? Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Good. Good morning. Before I begin my prepared testimony, I just wanted to acknowledge what we've just heard from Mr. Martinez, which raises questions that, as Mr. Martinez rightly notes, are not the subject of this report and were not the subject of this investigation. I'm obviously not prepared to speak today on the nature of resident involvement in contracting and other issues, but we've heard you loud and clear, and I'm gonna take a look at the issues that you've raised, and I'm happy to have further conversation with you after this if you'd like to speak to me about the concerns that you have. Okay. All right. Good morning. My name is Jocelyn Strawber. I'm the Commissioner of the New York City Department of Investigation. Thank you, Chair Banks and other members of the Committee on Public Housing, for the opportunity to speak to you today about our recent investigation and report on the oversight of security guards at the New York City Housing Authority senior buildings and its compliance with fire guard requirements at both senior buildings and other NYCHA developments. DOI's investigation identified numerous failures in the security and fire guard services provided by FJC Security, doing business as Allied Universal Security Services, which I'll refer to today as Allied Universal or Allied, which had an $155 million five-year contract with NYCHA to provide these services. DOI determined that both NYCHA and Allied failed to consistently provide required and sufficient oversight of the Allied guards, and thus failed to ensure that Allied fulfilled its obligations to NYCHA under the contract. The absence of security guards at buildings dedicated to seniors jeopardized the safety of some of NYCHA's most vulnerable residents, and the absence of fire guards not only posed a safety risk to residents, but also violated the New York City Fire Code. Furthermore, as a result of NYCHA's lack of oversight of Allied, NYCHA paid Allied for services that it did not provide and missed opportunities to pursue contractual damages to which NYCHA was entitled based on Allied's non-performance. Our investigation was prompted by March 2022 media reports that the front door of NYCHA's Corsi houses in East Harlem did not lock, allowing trespassers to enter. DOI initially focused on the functionality of the lobby doors at Corsi houses and the quality of security guard services provided by Allied Universal at that location. In our first inspection, investigators observed that the scheduled security guard was absent and a non-resident trespasser was in the lobby of Corsi houses, prompting a broader investigation into the security guards and infrastructure at NYCHA's senior buildings that continued through April of 2023. DOI inspected 39 senior buildings and reviewed CCTV footage of 55 security guard shifts, reviewing a total of 94 individual security guard shifts as part of its investigation. We concluded that security guards frequently abandoned their posts or failed to show up for work and falsified their paper timesheets to reflect having worked a full shift. We found that approximately 68% of the security guards that we surveilled through inspections and review of CCRV footage were absent for all or part of their required shift. Of the 94 shifts we reviewed, 54 guards abandoned their posts for an average of approximately 2 hours, 5 were no-shows for their entire 8-hour shift, and 5 committed other infractions, such as remaining in an unauthorized location away from their required posts, sleeping, or consuming alcohol during shifts. Some of those absent guards also falsified their timesheets. We also found that approximately 32% of the 28 lobby doors that we inspected were not secure, and 70% of the 63 senior buildings that we looked at had CCTV cameras that were inoperable or could not be viewed remotely. In the spring and summer of 2023, DOI also investigated the fire guard services provided by Allied at NYCHA buildings where, due to deficient safety features, the NYC Fire Code requires that a fire guard be present 24/7. DOI inspected 60 fire watch sites in June and July of 2023 and found that only 30% of the fire guards scheduled to be present were at their assigned posts for the duration of our inspection, which lasted 1 to 2 hours. Some fire guards also falsified their timesheets to indicate that they had worked a full shift. DOI made NYCHA aware of its findings while conducting the investigation, and the fire guards continued to abandon their posts thereafter in violation of Allied's contract with NYCHA. Furthermore, DOI found that scheduled fire guards were absent during 3 fires that occurred in 3 different developments, in the Ingersoll houses, Douglas houses, and Taft houses, 2 of which resulted in minor injuries. These fires occurred in February, March, and May of 2023. DOI attributed these lapses in security and fire guard services in part to NYCHA and Allied Universal's failure to consistently exercise required oversight of the security and fire guards that could have prevented or mitigated the guards' absences and other non-compliance. The contract, as well as NYCHA's standard operating procedure manual, required NYCHA to actively oversee security and fire guards. At NYCHA, oversight was the responsibility of the Office of Safety and Security, OSS, a department that did not consistently conduct field inspections of the security and fire guards and did not document the inspections that it did conduct for multiple consecutive years of the contract term. As a result of these failures, NYCHA and Allied did not identify and promptly address the guards' absences and other noncompliance, and Allied Universal billed and NYCHA paid for services which NYCHA did not in fact receive. While Allied Universal is no longer providing services to NYCHA, NYCHA has committed to provide security guards at senior buildings and continues to be legally required to provide fire guards wherever necessary. Therefore, DOI made 12 recommendations in its report to improve NYCHA's oversight of vendors providing these services. Those recommendations include NYCHA contracts for security and fire guard services should include a requirement that a vendor provide a smartphone application for the guards that incorporates geofencing technology and electronic timekeeping that alerts managerial staff when guards leave the boundary of their assigned post during their shift. NYCHA contracts for security and fire guard services should include a definition of post abandonment that specifies the minimum number of minutes that constitute post abandonment. NYCHA should provide security guards with a designated security desk on the main floor of the building to serve as a central location for the guards. NYCHA should also post signage in the lobby with information about contacting NYCHA for emergencies or with complaints or inquiries. NYCHA should require OSS to conduct and document a minimum number of unannounced inspections each month. NYCHA should revise the security guard field inspection report to require that inspections include a check that the lobby doors are functioning properly, to specify that deficiencies related to security infrastructure be immediately reported, and to provide an electronic method of submitting that form. NYCHA should also establish a process for receipt and verification of invoices, certified payroll, electronic timekeeping, and geofencing records prior to payment. NYCHA should require the vendor to provide biweekly invoices to permit timely CCTV footage review, and NYCHA should retain the relevant footage until the invoice has been approved. NYCHA accepted 8 of the 12 recommendations and accepted the remaining 4 in part. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Well, thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for the report and keeping the public informed as for these findings. First of all, let me start with, and I thank God that Allied is no longer the contractor. Are you able to share at what point during the investigation NYCHA was first alerted of the issues with Allied Universal?
Well, certainly with respect to the fire guards, as I mentioned, NYCHA was alerted in the course of the investigation. So that would have been sometime in June or July of 2023. And I believe it's in the report. I'm going to try to find you the exact date. But we also made NYCHA aware of the issues with the security guards, well before the issuance of this report. I'll find the exact. Actually, we shared the results of the security guard inquiry with NYCHA in June of 2023. We completed that portion of the inquiry in April of 2023. So NYCHA was timely informed,
Okay.
Which is something that we will always try to do in
Right.
a public safety-related investigation like this one.
Thank you. How did NYCHA's actions and responsiveness change before and after they were alerted during this investigation?
Well, just to be clear, our investigation is really focused on the time periods that I mentioned.
Right.
So I'm not in a position to give sort of detail that goes beyond the report.
Okay.
That addresses how NYCHA responded to the information that we provided. Then I can say, and the report, goes into some detail about the approach that NYCHA took to the inspections and to documenting the inspections prior to and during the period of our investigation. But in terms of like what NYCHA has done differently since then, I'm not able to go beyond what's in the report. I know that the recommendations have been accepted. I don't think at this point they've all been implemented, but NYCHA can probably give you more specific detail on that.
Okay. Well, then, can you answer this? Then, what sparked the need for this investigation, and what key events led to the DOI to investigate?
Yeah. So there were in March, I believe, of 2022, media reports that I think have video from the lobby of the Corsi houses that show, the broken lobby doors, a trespasser, and that was really what caused us to start this investigation. It was then our own findings when we did, on-the-scene inspections that led us to broaden the investigation beyond where it started.
Well, what is the earliest connection that DOI found between NYCHA and Allied Universal?
The earliest connection in terms of the contract period?
Yes.
I believe the contract with Allied goes back to 2019. Again, we can certainly get you the specifics on that, but it goes back well beyond the period that we looked at, and NYCHA for a number of years did not conduct, at least in terms of the documentation that we saw. Yeah, it goes back to 2019,
Right.
The commencement of the contract and the inspections, and we have a chart in the report that goes through this. The inspections, the field inspections to ensure that the security and fire guards were present on the scene. NYCHA did not begin those inspections, or at least did not begin to document them in a way that establishes that they took place until September of 2021.
Okay. What are the main takeaways from the investigation regarding how both parties, NYCHA and Allied, are failed on conducting oversight, the proper oversight?
Well, as we mentioned, this was obviously the Allied had its own responsibilities to do oversight of its guards, which we found that they were not fulfilling. NYCHA also had its own responsibilities, both to oversee the guards itself in terms of conducting its own inspections, and to ensure that Allied was conducting the inspections it was required to conduct pursuant to the contract. And for a number of years, and the chart on page 19 of the report is a useful reference point here because it shows there were almost no inspections in 2021, more inspections, probably not enough in 2022, and then the number goes up significantly in 2023. So for a number of years, NYCHA was not fulfilling its responsibilities. This was the Office of Security Services that was required to conduct these inspections, but it also, through our investigation, not only was OSS not performing, but there did not appear to be any supervisor or more, supervisor of OSS within NYCHA who identified these issues until, far later in the contract term.
Okay.
So,
the report reference to the contract as failed. What would a successful partnership between NYCHA and the security guard fire safety guard program look like?
Well, I think ultimately in a public safety context, fire safety, security, success is you don't there's no partial success. Like, you've got to have fire guards on the scene 24/7. You've got to have the security guards that you hire present for the period that you hired them. I think what our recommendations do here is to try to use the technology that's now available, geofencing, for example. There is the ability to know, based on an app that can be put on a phone that a guard can be in possession of, there is the ability to actually know whether someone is where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there. And so our recommendation, certainly we want physical things like a podium, a desk where the security guards can actually sit and be present. That wasn't true in every lobby where they were supposed to be. We want there to be clear signage, so when residents see that there are issues, there's a number for them to call to report concerns. But we also think you should take advantage of the technology that we now have, so that you don't have to rely on handwritten timesheets and in-person inspections, and even review of CCTV footage, which obviously those TVs should be operable, they should be remotely viewable. That will also help. But I think if you use some of the technology that we've recommended and that NYCHA has agreed to use with any contract going forward, you will have a more foolproof way to ensure that the people that you hire are where they're supposed to be, that you're getting what you paid for, and also that if they're not there, that you will know, right? Because there can be alerts that are pinged to managers when someone goes outside of the geofencing zone they're supposed to be in for the period of their shift, for example.
Well, of the 12 recommendations in your report, which would you say are priority items for NYCHA to avoid this kind of situation in the future?
Well, I would say they're all priorities. And we really do try to be judicious and not make recommendations that we don't think are important. But I think the geofencing technology that we just mentioned is going to be a very significant step forward in reducing the risk of human error and reducing the risk that someone can falsify a timesheet, which is difficult to identify in real time if you don't have that kind of technology.
Well, do you think we can achieve a combination of the two?
I think we can.
NYCHA only partially accepted 4 of the DOI's 12 recommendations, primary declining to implement changes to current contracts. Does DOI believe that NYCHA's response adequately addresses the serious oversight issues identified in the investigation?
So what I'll say here is, we share our report when it's complete, but before issuance with the agency, so we can get their feedback and so we can incorporate their responses, and we incorporate them as they provide them. One of the things that NYCHA says with respect to geofencing is that it would be overly burdensome and require substantive contract changes that would be too time consuming to achieve, to try to essentially retroactively change the terms of current contracts. I'm not in a position at this point without doing sort of a further deep dive to assess that.
Right.
Certainly, we were looking at the contract with Allied. We haven't looked at every contract that these recommendations would be affected by. So I think the answer is that these are NYCHA's responses. We're certainly very pleased that they've accepted the majority of the recommendations. As to the nuances of what they can and can't do now, I'm really not in a position to comment on those contracts because I haven't reviewed them.
Okay. Well, do you believe that NYCHA can maintain adequate oversight if they do not implement all the changes?
I think it's harder for the reasons that I've just said, but I think, providing sufficient resources so that OSS can do in-person inspections, which is what we did to shed light on these issues, I think will go a long way if, in fact, the current contracts are simply not amenable to change at this point.
Okay. NYCHA cited cost and time concerns as a reason for not implementing the geofencing technology in current contracts. Given that millions were potentially wasted on unperformed services, do you find this justification convincing?
Well, again, it's hard to say because the losses or waste that we found relates to the Allied contract.
Right.
I think the concerns about implementation of the recommendations relate to current contracts. And again, I don't know whether there's, I just don't know the cost of reforming, revising, renegotiating the current contracts. So I think we'd need to know more about that to really fully evaluate that response.
Well, what is DOI's estimate of money NYCHA lost paying for these services that were never rendered, and how was this calculated?
Right, it's a difficult calculation to make, unfortunately, because NYCHA wasn't doing the inspections that would have identified guards' absence, which would have given rise to both, liquidated damages, which NYCHA was entitled to under the contract, or an affirmative remedy they could have sought, and also would have obviously enabled them not to pay Allied for the work that Allied wasn't doing. We know that all I can actually give you on this, therefore, is NYCHA's calculation, which was about $500,000 of liquidated damages that they calculated based on the inspections they did do from October 2022 to February 2024. My understanding is, at least as of the date of the issuance of the report, NYCHA had only received about $88,700 in damages based on Allied's failure to comply with the contract term. But I can't actually give you a sort of overall picture. You could take the findings that we made and extrapolate them out over the total number of guards that Allied provided. I haven't done that math. that would, if you viewed the work that we did as a representative sample, that might give you some rough sense, but that's probably a very, inaccurate way to do a calculation. So.
Well, thank you for that. When it comes to previous investigations into NYCHA's contractors, based on this most recent investigation and previous investigations into NYCHA's contractors, what are your primary takeaways?
Well, I mean, there have been sort of two major, recent investigations that I'm thinking of that relate to contracting. We had the micro purchase issue, which may be one of the ones you're referring to. That actually posed different issues, I think, than this investigation does. And I'm sort of reluctant to speak in sweeping terms beyond the work that we've done. We certainly found, in connection with the micro purchase investigation that resulted, as you know, in the charges against 70 NYCHA superintendents, that there were policy improvements that, in fact, we had recommended a number of years before that we thought would have gone a long way to mitigating the risk of the kind of bribery that the micro purchase process, which, although it has many advantages, has a number of downsides. We thought there were recommendations that we made that, in fact, NYCHA has now implemented that would have potentially prevented some of the misconduct we saw in that case. Here, this is not an issue that I'm aware that DOI has addressed before, but I think fundamentally it was a failure of oversight of the contract of the vendor.
Okay. Has the DOI noticed any trends in the quality of service provided by NYCHA contractors?
I can't really speak to trends in general. I think we certainly saw here that there was a lack of oversight, and that lack of oversight may have facilitated and certainly allowed to go unchecked, a failure to provide service at the level that was contracted for, and that was legally required in the case of the fire guards.
Well, are the issues you've identified in your investigation of NYCHA unique to NYCHA, or do you see these issues across agencies?
Well, I think it's fair to say, without suggesting that we've done investigations of exactly this type across other agencies, I think it's fair to say that when there is a lack of oversight, there is always a risk of some kind of waste, fraud, misconduct, timesheets being falsified, conduct that is allowed to go unchecked, right? Kind of perpetuates itself in that sense, and perhaps, comes to be accepted or acceptable. So I can certainly say that I think in any situation where there's a significant contract, particularly one that requires or facilitates compliance with the law, like a fire code, when you don't have oversight of it and you don't make sure that it's being enforced, there's a risk that we'll see just this kind, of failure to comply.
Before we proceed with my further questions, we've been joined as well via Zoom by Councilmember Sanchez. A lack of security guards and fire safety guards at critical NYCHA developments, including senior housing and fire watch locations, is incredibly dangerous for public housing residents. Is a situation as severe as the investigation being discussed comparable to investigations the DOI has conducted in the past?
Again, I think, this is, I think that's a difficult question to answer. I mean, I think this is a serious issue when you have security guards who are not present. NYCHA has made the point, and they're right, they don't have a legal obligation to provide security guards, but they've chosen to do so. As you noted earlier, funding's been provided for that. Senior buildings have residents that are vulnerable in unique ways. So I think it's critically important that these kinds of services be provided, and certainly, obviously, in the fire guard context, it kind of goes without saying, you only need a fire guard if your fire safety features are deficient in certain ways. So to have that guard not, in fact, be present is, a violation of the fire code. It clearly poses a safety risk. I think these are very serious issues, and I think, as we heard, I think residents are certainly entitled to be protected from these kinds of risks. And when it's NYCHA's intention to protect them and they're spending money to protect them, then the contract should be properly overseen so that that protection is provided.
Okay, with that, I'm going to now allow Councilmember Bottcher to give his questions. Councilman Bottcher?
Thank you, Chair. Hi. Hi. Let and earlier you referred to policy recommendations that the Department of Investigation could have been avoided. Are there current recommendations that
Those have all been implemented, which is good news. As to obviously the current recommendations that we've made, have not yet been implemented, but they have been accepted. I have a lengthy chart here of all the recommendations that we've made and their status. But I'm not actually. I think this chart is really just of the current recommendations because there are only 12. But even if I had them all here, I'm not in a position now to speak to you about every recommendation, going back in time that we've made to NYCHA and the status. It's certainly something, we are engaged with all of the agencies that we oversee in an ongoing process of evaluating the outstanding recommendations, their implementation status, and pushing for those recommendations to be implemented, as we should be. But I'm not in a position to speak today about sort of the history of the recommendations we've made to NYCHA and their status. I can certainly have a further conversation with you about that, but I can't do it now.
do you meet regularly?
Just because it's not all in my
Understood.
in my head.
Do you meet regularly with NYCHA to review all these recommendations?
We have regular meetings with NYCHA on any number. Our recommendations are accepted and implemented, accepted if not implemented citywide. Oh, actually, thank you, Rebecca. I have a little bit more information than I thought I did, although I still can't go through chapter and verse in terms of all of our recommendations. But I can tell you that as of just a couple days ago, since 2022, we've issued 94 recommendations to NYCHA. 85 have been accepted. 56 have been implemented. And 3 of the 85 we deem as the practice is already in place.
And the 56 of 94 implemented, are these like recent recommendations or are these years in the making?
So the period, I may not have made this clear, I'm giving you stats from 2022 to the present.
Okay.
So that's how far back they go.
All right. Okay. We're discussing in this hearing the use of paid security guards with services like Allied Universal. We get in the campuses that are located in my council district, NYCHA, Elliott, Chelsea, and Fulton houses, paid security detail has been hired. I don't know if it's Allied Universal or another firm, but we get really mixed results from those security firms because they, as paid security detail, they lack the authority to do much other than be there and serve as a deterrent and, ostensibly report things, but they're not a substitute for a uniformed PD presence. I understand that currently it's not allowed, it's not legally prohibited for like a RAD Pact partner, for example, to hire paid NYPD detail to patrol NYCHA developments. Like, in Dwayne Reed, they hire NYPD, off-duty PD, other commercial enterprises. Are you aware of that dynamic with paid NYPD detail in NYCHA campuses?
I mean, we haven't, to my knowledge, looked into it. As I'm sitting here, I don't have any information on that to provide, no.
Do you
It
have
doesn't mean
any-
it's not happening or that it's not being contemplated, or
Sure.
I can't speak to it.
Do you have any assessment of the efficacy of security detail like Allied, Universal, even when they are present?
Right, well, certainly if they're not present, they're not effective. But the issue that you're raising, which is obviously a slightly different one, which is the limits of the authority and enforcement capability of a security detail of the type that Allied provides, that is not something that as far as I know, we've studied, the sort of relative, but I can certainly see how, they serve primarily as a deterrent, and my assumption is in a dangerous situation, they would likely require more support to provide, and would reach out to law enforcement if necessary.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Botcha, Member Botcha. Now, I just wanted to dive back into how some of your findings when it came to the actual security guards, and is it common for NYCHA to rotate the same guards across different properties?
In terms
On the
of
same day?
the
same day?
assignment of the same
Yeah.
guards,
Well,
I don't know whether they rotate them or they don't rotate them. I don't know exactly how they're assigned to particular locations.
Well, in your investigation, was did you look into that?
We weren't really looking into guard rotations at all. We were looking at whether those who had been contracted to be there were present, but
Right.
we weren't looking into rotation issues specifically.
Well, because I know we're talking about coverage, and if a guard is rotated and the next guard that's supposed to be on shift doesn't show up, but is also claiming that they were there, that possibly could be a scenario where a guard can falsify timesheets in a situation like that.
Sure. I mean, these were paper timesheets, so what we saw was things like we were there in the middle of the day, a guard wasn't on site, and the timesheet showed that the person had already worked a full day. So the kind of thing we were seeing, I think, could happen under kind of any circumstances because they're just paper timesheets with no real-time monitoring. But sure, I suppose if there was a rotation situation and someone was leaving and someone else was expected to show up and didn't, that would create the kind of circumstances that we're seeing.
I mean, well, would you recommend? I mean, outside of the recommendations that you gave, that NYCHA observe these gaps in coverage?
Well, certainly there shouldn't be gaps in coverage, right? So the contract should be structured in such a way that if there's going to be, I mean, someone may have to leave the desk for some very brief period of time, but other than that, the way, for whatever period of coverage NYCHA intends to provide, which is 24/7 for the fire guards, and potentially a different schedule depending on the building for the security guards, there should be sufficient coverage for that period, however that's accomplished. It could be splitting the shift among different guards. It could be somebody working a longer shift. That's not an issue we really drilled down into because we had sort of more fundamental problems with the way
Right.
this was being handled.
When it comes to working conditions for the fire guards and the security guards at NYCHA, any insight into what the working conditions were?
One of the recommendations we make about having a central security desk is some of these buildings didn't have a set location for a person to sit, which obviously makes it easier for someone. First of all, it makes it more difficult potentially for them because they don't have a central, location to be at, but also potentially easier for them to wander off. Beyond that, we weren't really looking into the working conditions for the guards. We certainly didn't learn anything that suggested that guards were abandoning their posts because the working conditions were so difficult. That's not something that we learned about or heard of in the course of this investigation.
Well, when we talking about the possibility of a guard needing to charge their phone, were there adequate charging stations? Was there adequate bathroom facilities for them to use when we talk about bathroom breaks? I mean, these are possibly gaps.
Right. I mean, the absences that we were seeing were not, given the length of time, were not about somebody needed a bathroom break or someone needed to go charge their phone. And the definition of post-abandonment is intended to recognize that there's some flexibility here, right? If you get up to use the bathroom, you get up to charge a phone, et cetera. That isn't the kind of problem we were observing. So that's
All right.
my thinking on that.
Would geofencing technology and electronic timekeeping work if the guards are unable to keep their devices charged?
No, I think you would need a working device that is charged in order for that technology to work.
Okay. Based on the last few DOI investigations into NYCHA's contracting practices, why has there been a disconnect between NYCHA's central office and the reality of the conditions at the individual buildings?
I don't know that that's a question that I can answer. We certainly looked at the fact that there was an office that wasn't performing and the fact that the supervisors who oversaw that office did not appreciate, understand, address that issue certainly in real time as it was allowed to persist. Exactly why there was a disconnect, that's not something I can answer.
Well, has DOI noticed any improvements in communications between the residents, on-site staff, and the administration?
Again, we weren't in this investigation really looking at resident and staff communication. I can tell you that there was not sufficient communication between OSS and its supervisors or sufficient oversight here because of the length of time that we saw when OSS was not fulfilling its responsibilities. And whether that's improved since then, I can't say at this point.
I mean, would you agree that communicating with residents or having a relationship with residents to some degree, when it comes to securing these properties, would you say that's important? It should be a part of the security apparatus.
Well, I want to be careful here because, as I said, I haven't studied Mr. Martinez has raised a number of questions about the nature of resident involvement in contracting, in security services. I cannot speak to the details of that and what those requirements are, although, as I've said, I'd like to be better educated about them, and I plan to be. Certainly, I think we've proposed the kind of signage that would facilitate residents being able to say there's no security guard here. And certainly, I think communication is important in any community. So I think the answer to that is absolutely. Exactly what kinds of communication should have taken place here beyond what we've recommended, I would want to think more about. But I think communication with residents and understanding their concerns and being aware that they're being placed in unsafe situations is critically important.
Does DOI conduct ongoing monitoring when it issues a report to see if the accepted recommendations are being implemented? I think you answered that through boxes.
So just to be precise about this, we have regular communications with all of the agencies that we oversee about the status of our recommendations. Monitoring really, to me, suggests we're on site doing spot checks to ensure that the processes that we've been told have been implemented are actually implemented. We do that sometimes depending on our available resources and the nature of the issue. But it doesn't mean we are always able to sort of go back and essentially reinvestigate to see whether or not all the recommendations are implemented. We do rely on our communications with the agencies and their representations about what they're doing to determine how to allocate our resources.
So you're solely relying on a report or direct conversations with NYCHA?
I mean, it depends. I wouldn't say solely in all cases, but I wouldn't want to suggest to you that we have the resources to go around sort of to physically confirm implementation of everything that we recommend. We don't.
Well, have you in the past done it? And since NYCHA has a pattern of these types of lapse, Has there been any special focus on the authority when it comes to?
I mean, look, I think with NYCHA in particular, we have a very strong, open line of communication. For example, the 14 recommendations that came out of the micro purchase contracts, we've had regular communication with NYCHA about the implementation. There are new policies and organizational structures in place. So, that's an example where I think we can feel very confident that those recommendations are being implemented.
Okay.
So I'll say that.
Based on NYCHA's responses, does DOI believe that the underlying cultural and systemic issues that led to to the oversight failures are being adequately addressed?
I think NYCHA has committed to address them. I mean, I think they've accepted our recommendations. We've talked about the recommendations that have only been accepted in part, but certainly in terms of making sure that OSS is conducting the oversight it's supposed to. I think NYCHA's fully accepted that recommendation, and my understanding is that's how they intend to proceed.
Do you think there are any key factors of the findings that need attention, or the recommendations that need attention?
I mean, I think, as I've said, I'm most interested. I think they're all important, but I'm interested in the deployment of geofencing technology as a way to remove the kind of human error and or misconduct element of some of the issues that we've seen. So I think, and I'm aware that those may be complex to implement, and there may be some cost associated with that, but I think it's sort of well worth it given the value of these contracts. So that's, going forward, one of the ones I would want to focus on.
The geofencing, how would that look? How would that be implemented? How would that, if that was became part of the security apparatus?
Well, I think the concept is that there is a mechanism by which guards, I would imagine, through their phones are kind of checking in when they arrive, and then their phone is sending a signal that confirms they are within a set location, a perimeter, if you will, and if they go outside that perimeter, there's both a record of that and also a real-time notification to whomever is handling the monitoring. And so that is, probably a pretty, simple, non-tech savvy explanation of how it would work.
With geofencing, would you think it would eliminate boots on the ground?
I'm not sure anything eliminates boots on the ground. I mean, there are usually, as technology evolves, sometimes ways of evading what that technology is seeking to provide can evolve, and so I don't think it eliminates it, but I think it could reduce the amount of boots on the ground you need to have effective oversight, and I think together, those are probably the most powerful way to address, what we saw happen here.
All right. Well, thank you, Commissioner, for your testimony.
Thank you.
We'll now have NYCHA. You may swear them in.
Good morning, everyone. If you could each raise your right hand, please. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee and to respond honestly to council member questions?
Do.
And if you could each state your name and your title for the record before you begin, that would be great. Thank you.
Sorry, my name and...
And title.
Okay. My name is Shin Kim. I am the Senior Vice President of Supply Management and Procurement at NYCHA.
Good morning. I'm Lauren Gray. I'm the Senior Vice President for Quality Assurance, Safety, and Technical Programs at NYCHA.
And good morning, Joseph Terranova, Senior Director, Office of Fire Safety.
Thank you. Want to know exactly what are the security standards for NYCHA developments, if any,
Chair?
and are there?
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Am I allowed to read testimony?
Do apologize.
Thank you.
Get into my questioning, but you may begin your statement. Do apologize.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Chair Chris Banks, members of the Committee on Public Housing, other distinguished members of the City Council, NYCHA residents, community advocates, and member of the public. Gray, NYCHA's Senior Vice President for Quality Assurance, Safety, and Technical Programs. I'm pleased to be joined by Shin Kim, Senior Vice President of Supply Management and Procurement, and Joseph Terranova, Senior Director for the Office of Fire Safety. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the authority's security communities. The safety and security of NYCHA, in partnership with the tenant association presidents, have proactively implemented a security guard program at our 52 buildings dedicated for seniors, even though security guard services are not required at any NYCHA developments. NYCHA is working with the city on another capital swap, which will fully fund the program in city fiscal year 2026. Fire guard services are required at buildings where an installed fire protection system is out of service for repairs. In accordance with the New York City Fire Code, one fire guard is assigned to patrol up to 50,000 square feet of space to watch for fires and alert emergency services and the Fire Department of New York if necessary. NYCHA has focused our efforts and financed an aggressive repair program that has significantly reduced the reliance on fire guards in buildings from over 150 locations in 2023 to just over 30 in 2025. We value our partnership with the New York City Department of Investigation and appreciate their efforts to bring to our attention areas of the authority that need improvement. NYCHA has already made significant progress with implementing several of DOI's recommendations and is accepting substantially all of the 12 recommendations as part of our shared goal to ensure safe and secure communities for NYCHA residents. For instance, NYCHA is amending its contract and invoicing process for security and fire guard services to enhance oversight, providing dedicated security desk or podiums for security guards in a central location at each building, posting signage with information for residents to report emergencies or make security-related inquiries or complaints, performing unannounced inspections as well as spot checks of cameras to ensure guards are present, and revising procedures related to the reporting of security infrastructure issues. While we acknowledge that there is a lot of work to do, we are grateful for the support of our partners, including DOI and the City Council, as we strive to ensure safe and secure communities at NYCHA and continue to improve residents' quality of life. Thank you for your partnership, and we are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you for your testimony and your opening statement. When it comes to security standards, what are the security standards for NYCHA developments, if any? And are there a prerequisite number of CCTV cameras or similar protocols?
So the protocols and standards for security officers at the NYCHA developments in senior buildings is they're our first line of defense. They're supposed to be at their site, manning the station, doing patrols of the lobby to check the doors to make sure that they're secure, keeping out any intruders to the buildings, obviously working with our TA presidents if they have any concerns. And of course, you know, if an emergency does happen at the development, they are to call 911 and of course reach out to their company to let them know that an emergency happened at the development.
Well, how often do you check the functionality of the security equipment at these NYCHA developments, particularly with the CCTV cameras? Can you give us the how often you check?
Certainly, that's a great question, thank you. So it's a mix of property management and the Office of Safety and Security that do checks on the cameras. So when people, the caretakers, start cleaning the buildings from rooftop to grounds, if they see any vandalism toward the cameras, they report it to the Office of Safety and Security. Property management is supposed to check the cameras and the systems every single day, like a quick spot check to make sure that they're working. And of course, the Office of Safety and Security does random spot checks of cameras. We're looking at footage and CCTVs all day long and making repairs to those CCTVs.
The contract that you had with Allied, was it a prerequisite for the security guards? Did they have access to the cameras?
No, they did not.
How does NYCHA gauge whether a development or a building is in need of security system upgrades or repair?
So that usually comes from a capital assessment and some feedback from operations. If we see that cameras are failing or that the systems are failing, we work together to identify hopefully some additional funding to make repairs and improvements to the camera system.
Are there currently any developments that only have a fire guard and doesn't have a security or boots on the ground, a security guard in the lobby?
Well, fire guards are supposed to roam the building. They're not actually supposed to be in the lobby. We have
No, I'm asking you, are there any NYCHA developments or senior developments that have a fire guard but don't have a security guard?
Yes, there are 24 or 23 developments that have fire guards because there's an impairment to the system and we're required to do that. And there's 2 or 3 buildings that actually have both a fire guard and a security guard because they're a senior building.
And when that happens, are the residents made aware?
Yes, we notify property management and the TA president that either a security guard or a fire guard is going to be present at the building.
Okay. Just an anecdote, Vandalia houses, for years, for a couple of years, after speaking to the tenant association president, and I think they just recently got a new tenant association president in the last year or so, but residents were saying that they were under the impression that the fire guard that was there was the security. And by finding that out and digging deeper, we found that at Vandalia houses there was they haven't had a security guard in the development for the last 3 to 4 to 5 years. Your testimony was that there was adequate communication, or there was communication to the tenant association and to management and to the residents. Why is it in that scenario there was no communication given to the residents that there was that the fire guard wasn't a security guard?
I'm not aware of this situation at Vandalia. I don't know when this took place. I do know that since I've come on board along with James Secreto, we have been actively engaging residents about the fire guard and security guard program. We've also, as part of the DOI, findings have already posted in our lobbies when a fire guard's supposed to be there and when a security guard is supposed to be there. We host quarterly meetings with residents and NYPD. It's like a resident roundtable. We talk about safety and security issues. We talk about the guards at these conferences, and we also meet with our CCOP yearly to give them updates about safety and security issues and guard development.
So currently, are you aware there is a security guard and a fire guard at Vandalia?
There's one at 77 Vandalia.
As of today, how many functioning CCTV cameras are installed at each development?
We have 52 developments that do not have CCTV coverage. We have over 20,000 cameras in the portfolio across 214 developments and 1,519 buildings.
How's that determination made as to what development receives cameras and what development doesn't?
A lot of that comes through working with the council, working with our partners in the state and federal levels in terms of funding. We also work with the TA president and property management once funding has been...
I'm asking you how is that determination made? Not from the funding aspect. Is there, if there's a need for security at these particular developments and this type of layered security that exists in other than senior developments, how is that determination made that one development should have cameras and the other ones should not? Or is it solely on the advocacy of the electeds?
A lot of it is advocacy on the electeds, and I'm not necessarily involved in the actual capital and construction of that. That's our AC&M department, who oversee the placement of CCTVs.
So cameras are not part of the regular security apparatus for these buildings?
There's 52 developments that don't have the cameras, so no.
Are you aware of any of the crime stats or some of the security concerns or needs at all the 50 NYCHA, 55 NYCHA sites or 54 NYCHA senior sites?
Out of the 52 senior sites,
Sorry, 52.
the crimes, 52 senior buildings, sorry. The crime is managed and monitored by NYPD.
I said, are you aware, not who manages it? Are you aware of the security needs and concerns?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Would you agree that most seniors would, if you were having conversations with them, would request or say there's a need for cameras in their building?
Yes, absolutely.
As of today, what percentage of front doors at NYCHA buildings are secured?
I don't have that information available, but we will get information about work order tickets for doors that are broken to you.
Would you agree that having a secured front door is part of security apparatus?
100%.
When a door is breached or when it's broken, how is that then communicated to the authority so that that door can be fixed?
Through a couple of ways. One, residents could call the CCC and put in a work order ticket for the door to be repaired. But mostly boots on the ground property management should be checking the doors every single day as they're doing cleanup of the buildings and walking along developments, and then creating a work order ticket to get the door prepared.
Well, you know, we had a contract with Allied for $6.8 million. What's the relationship as far as them reporting back to the authority when a door is broken in one of these senior buildings?
They weren't under the 2019 contract. They weren't required to report broken doors to NYCHA.
Who was in charge of overseeing security at the NYCHA buildings?
Well, I'm overseeing the Office of Safety and Security, and we have our role in terms of making sure cameras are working, people have access to them from the system. We work with various partners with NYPD and DHS to ensure different programs happen at the development to make residents more safe and more secure. But property management oversees the day-to-day operation to make sure that the doors are closing properly.
What types of relationships are the security guards and the fire safety guards expected to have with the public housing residents? And what level of visibility are they expected to maintain?
So with our new vendors, and we also have a solicitation out right now for a new guard in contract for security guards and for fire guards, we are going to have mandatory meetings with these companies to meet with the residents on a quarterly basis to discuss any issues that they might be having, anything we could do to improve the level of service from the fire guards and the security guards.
And I think this is a broad question. Would you agree that, do you agree to the findings in the report?
Yes.
Okay. And the recommendations that have been made?
Yes.
Can you explain why NYCHA has not fully agreed to 4 of the 12 recommendations put forth by DOI then?
Sure. I'll let my Chief Procurement Officer, Shin Kim, answer.
Okay, thank you for that question. So the 4 that were partial, that we stated were partial, is mainly due to the fact that there is currently a solicitation out there on the street for fire and security guard services that incorporates all of DOI's recommendations, all 12. So
this is the procurement process? Or is this the...
So what I wanted to say was that there is a procurement out there currently that incorporates all of these recommendations. And these are material changes to the requirements that would be implemented post-award to the current contractors. So we really characterize it as partial in light of the fact that there is a new solicitation out there. And once the new complement of vendors are onboarded through this process, everybody will be subject to all 12, and we will have fully accepted the recommendations.
Okay. For the recommendations not accepted, um, for the recommendations not accepted due to contractual obligations, can NYCHA commit to accepting them in future contracts?
Yes, certainly. Thank you for that question, and we will, and that is exactly our plan to do so with the new composition of vendors.
Is there any easy, accessible system in which public housing residents can report the absence of security or fire safety guards? And do residents have knowledge of scheduled hours for security and fire safety guards?
That's a great question. So yes, we have a 24-hour hotline. It's 306-8800. They can call the Office of Safety and Security to report any fire guard or security guard issues. We let the TA president and property management staff know the times of the security guards, and that was agreed upon as we've done walkthroughs with the TA president and property management, because we wanted to give the residents the hours that they wanted. So most of the residents at these senior buildings know the times when a guard should be there. For fire guards, it's 24/7 at most buildings. So there should be, they usually in 3 8-hour shifts, unless it's like a community center or senior center. A guard will be there when the center is open if there's a fire impairment. But fire guards have to be there 24/7 in our residential buildings.
So how many NYCHA developments or senior developments have 24-hour security? And can you give me a breakdown of what's the security apparatus of all the 52 sites?
Bear with me 1 second.
And while you're finding that, I think you had talked the knowledge of the schedules. Is that made public? Is that advertised to the residents outside of just a walkthrough that's being done? Is there any type of direct communications to the senior residents as to what's the shifts for the security coverage?
So for security coverage, again, we work with property management and the TA president to know that they notify us what they would like.
Well, are you aware of what's the direct? How do they directly reach out to the residents to let them know what the security apparatus is or what the security schedule is?
Currently, I don't know if they're doing that, but this is something we're going to.
You think that's important?
Absolutely. When something we're going to implement with the new contracts on board shortly. To answer your question about 24-hour coverage, there's currently one building with 24-hour coverage. The remainder are either 16 or 18 hours.
Okay. And repeat that again?
The remainder of the 52 buildings are either 16 or 18-hour coverage. 8, sorry, excuse me.
Okay. The how does OSS ensure that security guards show up at their scheduled posts?
That is really a good question. So since 2022, 2023, when myself and James Secreto took over the Office of Safety and Security for mismanagement of the contract, one of the main director resigned, the deputy director was moved. The first thing we started to do was better oversight by hiring additional staff and really changing the culture of how we manage the contract. So during the time of 2019 through 2022, there was an average of 40 to 60 inspections happening per month. Between
You said how many inspections?
40 to 60. So in 2022 and 2023, we upped those inspections to almost 150 per month. And from 2024 until 2025, we've been doing over 250 inspections a month between the Office of Safety and Security, the Fire Safety Department, and Quality Assurance Department, which is also under my purview.
And that's since the termination of the contract with Allied.
We've increased during Allied. We went from 40 to 60 all the way up to 150.
So during Allied, you were doing inspections?
Correct. 2023 through 2024.
And you miss the fact that they were forging timesheets?
No, we actually went after them very aggressively. We sent multiple liquidated damages memos to Allied, we asked for a corrective action plan to try to get them to perform better when they failed to perform better, either by not including geofencing, which we asked for, additional quality assurance checks on the buildings, and giving us accurate and up-to-date timekeeping. We started to pursue other venues to get other vendors on board in 2023.
Well, these failures that you found internally, were they made available to the residents? Or
No,
did you,
they were not.
Did you report them to the TAs,
No, we did not.
and why was that?
NYCHA was
You don't think that it's important for them to know that these laps exist?
we do. But
So why didn't you report it to them?
because we were actively pursuing,
Well, after you got your findings, why didn't you think that was important to do?
oversight on our part, but something we will definitely do
So
with the
you
next
would
contract.
agree that you failed on
Yes.
that? And I think we had actually started going through a walkthrough of NYCHA's Office of Safety and Security policies. How does the OSS schedule security guard shifts?
So before a security guard is brought on site, we work with both property management and the TA president to ask and identify the preferred times to have the security guard there, because they live there, they know when they'll feel more vulnerable. And based on information provided by property management and the TA president, we schedule the guards accordingly.
So the tenant association plays an active role in scheduling?
Yes.
Okay. Well, how does OSS document and escalate misconduct by security guards, such as misshifts?
So misshifts or being out of uniform or leaving a post early. As I mentioned earlier, we have documented multiple memos, and this is towards Allied. We documented multiple instances when they were failure to perform, and we've gone after them for liquidated damages and unpaid some of the invoices.
How is that information gathered? Are there situations or scenarios where a tenant association president or the TA or member or resident has reached out and made a complaint? And you said there's a hotline that
Yes.
exists? Okay.
And yes.
And how many? Can you give us an insight as to how many times that has happened? Do you have those numbers?
I don't have those numbers with me, but we have had TA presidents complain to us about safety and security issues, either with the fire guards or the security guards. We immediately jumped into action in the Office of Safety and Security. If there are cameras, we looked on the video to see if the guard actually showed up or not, or stayed on their post. We took snapshots. We provided that information to Allied. We also informed Allied that guard is no longer allowed to work on the NYCHA campus because of their failures to our residents.
Okay. But can you, guys, we got to maintain some decorum. Right now, thank you. You said you have those documented?
Yes.
Okay. So we would love to see the numbers as to how many times you've gotten reports from this hotline or from any leadership, from the tenant association leadership. What percentage of security and fire guard services are provided by contractors versus NYCHA staff? And if these services are provided by contractors, can you share which contractors?
Sure. So 100% of both fire guard and security guard is contracted out. The current guard companies that NYCHA is working with is ISS, Wisdom, and CitySafe.
We're going to come back to my round of questioning, and we'll allow Councilman Botcher to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Earlier in today's hearing, the Department of Investigations testified about their recommendations to NYCHA, and they referred to the 70 current and former NYCHA employees that were charged with bribery and extortion last year. Department of Investigations referred to recommendations that they had made earlier before that, saying that if those recommendations had been implemented, then those indictments, that misconduct may not have happened. Since 2022, the Department of Investigations has made 94 recommendations to NYCHA. 56 have been implemented, according to their testimony today. Could you explain why only 56 of the 94 recommendations since 2022 have been implemented, and what's the status of the outstanding recommendations?
Thank you for that question, Council Member. I don't oversee the DOI, the 56. I can tell you about the 12 related to this report that most of which have already been implemented and we're going to implement over the next year. Do you have any insight into this? No? Yeah, we can give you the information from the compliance department.
Are there other recommendations that follow under your portfolio, recommendations relating to quality assurance, safety, and technical programs that are outstanding from the Department of Investigations?
None.
Can you speak to, within the RADPACT program, the ability of RADPACT partners to hire paid NYPD security detail for NYCHA campuses?
Unfortunately, I don't oversee the RADPAC portfolio, and I'm unable to answer that question today.
So that's, if it's a RADPACT portfolio, that's not under your purview at all?
No.
Is NYCHA able to hire paid security detail from PD?
Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions?
Yes, I do. And I'm Brian Honan, Vice President of Intergovernmental Relations. So, council member, we do have paid security in terms of NYCHA hiring NYPD. For many years, NYCHA paid NYPD $70 million a year.
Right.
Under the de Blasio administration, that money was, NYCHA was forgiven of that, and we didn't have to pay anymore. I think public housing residents shouldn't have to pay NYPD for services that you or I have provided in our developments. I think that this should be a regular course of business. I think security officers are very important in senior developments, but paying extra for NYPD service, I don't think that is something that, with limited funds, we should be expected to do.
I agree. And for many years, NYCHA was paying $70 million a year to the NYPD for NYPD coverage. And it was a good thing that they're no longer made to pay for the NYPD coverage. Anecdotally, we hear about a lot less NYPD coverage since NYCHA hasn't been paying $70 million a year. Is that true? And do you attribute that to the fact that NYCHA's not paying the NYPD?
I think NYPD would be better able to answer that question. I do know that that things have changed, but I don't know the cause of that.
Has the NYPD ever said to you that the fact that there's no longer a $70 million annual payment, that's resulted in less presence?
No, they have not.
Thank you, Councilmember Botcher. I guess I'll go on to the recent DOI report, and we'll get a little deeper dive into the recommendations. NYCHA contracted with Allied Universal for $75 million to provide security and fire guard services from 2019 to 2023. NYCHA renewed this contract twice for an additional $80 million, extending services to February 2024. When did NYCHA first become aware of the infractions by Allied Universal with regard to this contract?
So when I came on board and James Secreto, who is the VP for Safety and Security, came on board, it was 2022. Okay. And like I had mentioned earlier, we started to work with Allied to try to correct the wrongs with corrective action plans, additional oversight by doing unannounced site visits, waiting for them to give us the geofencing technology, timekeeping that was not done on paper. And when we realized that the work was not improving on Allied side in 2023, we started to work with our law department and our procurement department to bring on additional guards and start to take away some of the Allied sites. And as I mentioned, we brought on Wisdom in mid-2023, ISS at the end of 23, and City Safe in 2024.
So that was the documented plan of action as far as the oversight of NYCHA. Why did it take an outside investigation by DOI to reveal problems that should have been caught by NYCHA's internal controls?
Well, we did. The report only came out in 2025, and we started making these changes back in 2022. Additionally, the biggest sticking point, not even the security guards, was the fire guards. So I was tasked to oversee and restructure the fire safety department. I brought on a fire safety professional, Mr. Joe Terranova, and he brought on a team of folks who were not administrators, but more hand-to-hammer kind of workers. Our tackle and our goal was to go to the developments that had the highest concentration of fire guards, and actually start making the repairs to the fire impairment. And with that, we were able to reduce, as I mentioned in testimony, we went from 150 buildings with fire guards pretty much 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're now down to 26 today. So it's a lot easier to oversee fire guards 24/7 in 26 buildings as opposed to 150. The residents are safer, they're more secure with now fire equipment that's actually working.
The DOI report found that 70% of the CCTV cameras at senior buildings were inoperable or inaccessible. What are the causes as to why the cameras were inoperable or inaccessible?
I don't know what they were at the time of the investigation, but I know we regularly check the safety and security CCTV cameras at senior developments. Not having access, some of our systems are standalone. They don't directly connect to
How old are these cameras?
It varies from development to development.
So, I mean, as far as the maintenance of these cameras, can you dive into what that looks like?
So if we find out that a camera is inoperable, my team is notified. We go out within 24 to 72 hours to repair the camera as quickly as we can. If it requires extensive work, we would potentially go to an outside vendor to do the work, but we do most of the work in-house. It's just easier for us to manage and track.
How many cameras are working as of today?
I'm assuming all 20,000, but I don't have that number right now.
You said you're assuming all 20,000?
Yes.
Would you agree that that should be a number, you should know that? I mean, when we're talking about securing safety of people's lives and cameras being a deterrence or possibly bringing justice or helping to bring justice, do you think it was important to have that information today to...
Absolutely, but I haven't been made aware of any cameras that are not working for today.
So you said you would assume that all cameras are working?
Yes.
What is NYCHA doing to maintain these cameras?
So there are several things that we're doing. Again, if janitorial staff, when they come down and they see that a camera's been vandalized, they report it to us immediately. We go out into the field. Vandalism, usually with the cameras, is someone either has spray painted on it or they've cracked it open. The team is replacing the camera heads as quickly as possible. If property management notices when they're going through their day-to-day that a camera's not working, they notify us immediately, and we deploy some staff to go in and correct.
When
any
was the
issues.
last time you got a report that a camera or system was down? And what particular development was that?
I'll have to get back to you on that information.
How often are you being informed as to when cameras are down?
Well, the Office of Safety and Security gets informed if it's something catastrophic like a development.
I said
that's-
how often?
How often? If
is
it's
that?
well, again, I have an entire office that oversees this. If it's something that's catastrophic that they need to loop me in, I get involved. But for the most part, it's usually 1 or 2 cameras that are off, or a couple of cameras are off per day that they go and they fix.
According to the DOI report, NYCHA failed to conduct or document required field inspections for almost 2 years of the Allied Universal contract. Does NYCHA know? Does NYCHA know how many inspections actually occurred from October 2019 to August 21st?
We do not.
And that's because of your failure to do the inspections?
I was
And-
I was not responsible for overseeing the department, nor were the people sitting here. The ones that were would have that information, and they're no longer with NYCHA.
Well, if there's no proper documentation, how can you be sure?
I do know that in 2022, when we came on board, we started to document these more frequently and have recently switched to an electronic format of documenting the guards when they're out in the field. And that number we can provide to you, the ones that we've done electronically to date.
What assurances can NYCHA provide that similar oversight failures are not occurring with other contractors currently working at NYCHA properties?
Well, there's several measures we're putting into place. We've obviously increased the amount of quality assurance checks that we've done at the developments. As part of the new contract, we're not only including geofencing, but we're also including geotabs, which go for fire guards, that goes throughout the building, which would have them actually make sure that we know what floors are on at various times to make sure they're actually patrolling the building. Additionally, the geofencing technology, which the 3 vendors are currently using right now, gives us updated real-time timekeeping. And we're also checking that against the cameras to make sure that they are reporting their time appropriately and that there is a guard on site.
Let me see. Why did NYCHA wait until October 2022 to begin documenting infractions and sending liquidated damages to Allied Universal when the contract began in October of 2019?
So previous management from 2019 to 2021 did not document anything. I don't think any liquidated damage was went out during that time. Again, when we started to recognize, the new team that was brought on board started to recognize the problems within the managing of the contracts for both fire and security, we started immediately documenting and reporting to Allied their deficiencies.
Let me ask you this: in your oversight or the inspections that "quote unquote" were done, where in that approach by NYCHA includes speaking to the residents?
It hasn't, but that's something that we would take into advisement and let the residents know that we're doing these oversight inspections and that we'll be on site at unannounced times.
Okay. I mean, would you agree that the communications to the residents have not been the best?
I agree with that, and we only want to get better.
The report indicated that even after NYCHA began documenting infractions, it often sent notices months after becoming aware of the problem. Is there a reason NYCHA does not send an infraction notice much sooner?
So we were waiting for Allied to provide us the timekeeping. We can't send an infraction and we can't go after them for liquidated damages if we don't have the information before us. They were very deficient in giving us proper timekeeping. So for example, if we were looking at the end of April, they'd have 2 weeks to 3 weeks in May to give us that report, the timekeeping report. We sometimes didn't get those reports until June or July.
I mean, is there, in your internal investigation, is there any other ways to do a check or to inspect if they're not compliant with providing that information?
Well, now with
Or you're solely waiting on, were you solely just waiting on them to report to you?
so
Or
as-
being, in a sense, being proactive
yeah.
as opposed to just waiting on that data?
So we actually, as part of the corrective action plan, required Allied to do geofencing because we just couldn't trust the timesheets that were coming into us anymore, and there was a lot of buildings to manage. Allied assured us that they were going to implement geofencing. I believe this was in March of 2023, and by May of 2023, when we didn't see any form of improvement, including the geofencing and the timesheets, that's when we started to work to get new contractors at the sites.
The DOI report mentions that NYCHA did not request proof of Allied or Universal's implementation of the staffing accountability plan. Can you share more about this plan and why it was never implemented?
So the corrective action plan or staffing accountability plan is what I was talking about. There were 3 components to that plan. The first one being that Allied was supposed to send out additional quality assurance officers like NYCHA was doing on their front and provide us with documentation showing that they actually did quality assurance checks. They were also supposed to implement the geofencing as part of upgrading the timekeeping, so NYCHA was to get that in real time. And the third was to actually provide us timesheets in a regular cadence if geofencing was not available. Again, we monitored it for several months to see some form of improvement. The improvement was not there, and we started to work to get rid of Allied out of NYCHA properties.
Okay. Could you share more details on how you plan to implement DOI's and recommendations that were published in their report?
Certainly. So, the invoicing system, again, we have geofencing technology now. We're getting the invoices on a regular cadence. We actually have already implemented the security guard desks at, I think, 98% of the locations. I think we have a back order of 2 desks, and hopefully they'll be installed this week. We actually posted the signage for both security guards and fire guards throughout the buildings that have it. We do unannounced site visits as requested by DOI, and we, again, prior to this even went out, we were doing 160 even before the report. We're now doing 250, so we're doing about 3,000 unannounced inspections a year. We are going to update the report as DOI requested the security report to include checking of both cameras and doors. That's a little bit of enhancement we have to do because it's an electronic security report. One of the other items that they asked is that to update our manual, which we are in the process of doing as well.
What is the projected timeline for completing the implementation of these recommendations?
Probably within less than a year.
Okay. Outside of DOI's recommendations, what measures, if any, are being evaluated to take a more proactive approach to oversight of contractors?
So the more active approach is, again, not only my Office of Safety and Security are doing the checks. Fire Safety Department, when they go out into the field, does quality assurance checks on guards, and I have also the Quality Assurance and Cost Control Department under my purview. They go out and they do unannounced inspections of fire guards and security guards as well, and report back to the Office of Safety and Security if they find any deficiencies.
Okay. When it comes to, I think Councilman Blanchard had brought this up to some degree, with the RADPAC converted developments, how many RADPAC converted developments have senior facilities, or not senior facilities, where there are senior buildings on those particular properties?
I'm happy to provide that information to you after the hearing.
Okay. The reason why I want to know, because I want to know what's the security apparatus and how that was transferred over, and is that still part of the NYCHA security? Is NYCHA still providing security for those particular?
Sorry. Once the development goes RADPAC, NYCHA is not required to provide safety and security at the.
Well, what's the oversight that's being done as far as what that security apparatus looks like?
That I don't know. Go
Council members, so once a property is converted to Rat Pack, they are required to provide a security plan to us. When it's a senior building, we do require at least the same level of service. Some of them have done even more. We also know that these workers are members of 32BJ. So we have had conversations with them to make sure that their membership transfers over to the new properties, and that folks don't lose their jobs if they're up to the task.
And who picks up the cost for that? Is
Picks up
that
the would be the developer.
the development? Okay. And they're reporting to you as far as how that apparatus looks and any inefficiencies that exist. And what is your oversight role in that security apparatus for those converted developments?
So it wouldn't be our teams here, but the real estate office in NYCHA gets regular reports on safety and security, and whatever plan that they have put in place before closing or after closing, it's up to them to make sure it's being maintained.
Okay. When it comes to backtrack, is Allied Universal or its parent security firm, FJC Security, still under contract with NYCHA in any capacity?
Thank you for the question, Chair Banks. Allied stopped providing services to NYCHA as of March 2024.
And what about FJC Security?
Same. So it's Allied working. I believe Allied brought one was bought out by the other. We initially contracted with FJC, and they've been performing in the capacity of Allied, and both Allied and FJC have stopped providing services.
I need to break that down a little bit better.
Sure.
And I'm gonna repeat the question to you. All right. Is Allied Universal or its present parent security firm, FJC Security, still under contract with NYCHA in any capacity?
Thank you for that question. No, Chair Banks. Both FJC and Allied are not providing services to NYCHA as of March 2024.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
The DOI report showed that NYCHA collected only 16% of the liquidated damages it was entitled to. How does NYCHA plan on recouping these outstanding damages in full?
So OFS is working closely with our law department to pursue remedies, including liquidated damages and withholding payments. We don't have a cost estimate for how much we are looking to recoup at this time.
Do you have numbers as to as far as how much the damages were?
I do not.
Can you get those numbers to us?
Absolutely.
And that would obviously be a breakdown as to the dollar amount?
Yes.
Okay. Does NYCHA have a reason to believe that the lack of timesheets or certified payrolls resulted in an undercount of damages?
As per the review of the team in the Office of Safety and Security, yes, we do, which is the reason why we wrote several liquidated damage memos to Allied for providing us with inaccurate timekeeping of their staff.
I mean, I think it would be important to make sure that the residents get justice, and this was not only a security a failure, but also these folks stole money from NYCHA and from the residents. How has NYCHA improved its enforcement of financial penalties against the underperforming contractors at NYCHA?
So in these current contracts, we are currently, anytime a guard fails to show up or leaves its post, we immediately send them a notification letting them know that we are not going to be paying them for their services. As part of the new contracts, and I can let Shin tell you a little bit more, I think there's more in terms of liquidated damages that we can go after.
Yes, thank you for that question. We have contractual remedies, including liquidated damages, that are built into the contract. And NYCHA also has the infrastructure to discontinue relationships with the vendor if deemed necessary and appropriate. So yes.
Are these new actions? These have always been on the books, or tools used by the authority to go after these bad actors?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to clarify. These have always been part of our terms and conditions, the ability to go after liquidated damages as well as contractually defaulting the contractor.
Do you think they've been useful with helping to correct some of the behavior of these contractors?
As a general statement from a procurement perspective, yes, we believe they are useful tools. And the procurement department also, outside of the DOI's recommendation, have instituted vendor disqualification as well as vendor responsibility standard procedures aimed at really strengthening vendor responsibility and the integrity of our vendors.
Since the replacement of Allied Universal and NYCHA security and fire guard contracts, has NYCHA identified any instances of guards missing or being late for their shifts? And if so, how are those instances handled?
We have. We have been working very closely with City Safe ISS and Wisdom to address those issues immediately. The head of my Office of Safety and Security, Director Anthony Kotarski, the day we find out about the issue, they are getting an email. We are sending them and letting them know that they are not going to be paid for that shift, and that we do not want that guard back on our property.
When did their contract begin?
I'm sorry?
When did their contract begin?
ISS Wisdom Morale,
Yes.
City Safe. They were in various stages. I believe ISS officially started with NYCHA in September of 2023. And Wisdom was November of 2023, and City Safe officially started in March of 2024.
So these are the three new contractors that
Yes.
are now providing. Okay. And is there a report card as on them meeting their contractual obligations?
I wouldn't say there's a report card, but we are
Or
active.
can you enlighten us as to how they've been behaving?
Yeah, much better. We are actively engaged with these three companies. I know Anthony meets with them probably when they first came on board. We were meeting with them weekly. As services improved and they got a rhythm and were showing up more regularly at NYCHA developments, we saw less and less of an issue. There will always be an issue. A guard might not show up. They might be late, but for the most part, we're seeing a much better turnaround rate and a much better performance by all three vendors.
And I have to constantly mention this or ask this: what role? How are you bringing in the residents in that report card or this oversight? Are you speaking to residents more now than you were before?
I think with the quarterly meetings, I think that's a great idea, is getting their feedback about guards at their sites and almost like giving them a ranking or a rating and seeing where we can improve. This is something we'll incorporate in the future for sure.
Can you do that? Can you commit to doing that in the near future?
Absolutely.
Because we don't want a repeat of this.
No.
When it comes to general oversight of the contractors, what percentage of repair work is performed by NYCHA staff versus contractors? This is for
This is for CCTV?
Yes.
99% of the work that happens on CCTV cameras is repaired in-house.
Okay, and who's responsible for verifying the delivery of contracted services at a development?
These are usually not big purchases. They're like micro purchases. It's to fix a camera that might not be able to be fixed under our jurisdiction. The number is not that significant in terms of the amount we use for vendors to do this work.
If you could provide those numbers.
After this hearing, absolutely.
Thank you. NYCHA often blames budget constraints for its inability to deliver certain services. Yet it paid millions for security services that were not delivered. How is NYCHA tracking the actual delivery of services across all contracts to ensure that NYCHA is not paying for work that has not been performed?
Is this particularly for fire contracts and security contracts, or all contracts?
Particularly relegated to fire and safety.
Okay, so again, we are constantly looking at timesheets. We are going out into the field to make sure that staff is there. We are checking cameras daily to make sure that staff is there. And again, this is a lot easier for NYCHA to manage now that we've repaired a lot of our buildings with the lack of or need of fire guards. So it's really important that we do as many field visits as possible to all of these sites, as many as possible per month, to ensure that the service that NYCHA residents are getting are there.
Have you visited any of these sites?
I have.
Okay. When was the last site you visited?
It was 2 weeks ago. I went to Bronx River.
Okay, and you, when you visited that site, did you get a chance to speak to the Tenant Association president?
In fact, I met with the Tenant Association
Excellent.
president.
How does NYCHA keep track of contract infractions?
So for the Allied, we have been using liquidated damages memos. So every time we get a group or several issues, we're noting it. We're immediately sending, during the Allied years, we were immediately sending out the memos, letting them know that they have committed an infraction, and this is what we were going to be going after for their lack of service to the residents.
And how are NYCHA residents expected to submit complaints about these contractors?
Well, thanks to the DOI report, we've now put the postings throughout our lobbies for both fire guards and security guards, and then there's a number on there that they can report to us too if they're having an issue with a guard.
Does NYCHA keep track of resident complaints about a vendor or particular employees? And where are these records normally kept?
The Office of Safety and Security does keep records of when there is a complaint that comes in from a resident.
Does NYCHA have an internal requirement to maintain documentation of the contractors' infractions?
We choose to. We keep it on file for anywhere from 7 to 10 years. I know we have Allied's information stored and have no intent of getting rid of it anytime soon.
Okay, and is there how often do you check, whether the proper documentation is being followed?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
No, I said, how often do you check whether proper documentation is being followed?
The timekeeping?
Yes.
Yes, so it is checked regularly as timekeeping information is coming in to us, and I think it's reported daily or weekly. Yeah, as we receive the invoices that come in, we are checking it up against the timekeeping that is provided to us by the guard companies.
And what is the procedure when a contractor's employee are found to be in violation of their service agreement, such as being absent for a shift or consuming substances on duty?
So we will get that infraction sent to the guard company, and as I mentioned, we will request that guard is not allowed to serve on NYCHA campus ever again.
Okay. And what recourse do tenants have if they have issues with a particular security or fire guard?
They are more than happy to reach out to the Office of Safety and Security, and we will work to have that guard removed from the property.
Okay. How often does NYCHA go to developments to ask tenants about this satisfaction with security and fire guard services?
So we have quarterly meetings, community roundtable meetings. We discuss a whole host of safety and security issues. Guards happens to be one of them. And again, we also meet with our CCOP at least once a year to go over safety and security issues. Guards are also mentioned at that meeting as well. And if a TA president has an issue with the fire guards or the security guards, I know myself, Anthony Kotarski, or James Secreto will absolutely go out to development and have a conversation with them.
What is NYCHA's policy towards vendors who are in violation of their contract?
Thank you for the question. So as mentioned earlier, we do have contractual remedies built in, and we do have the infrastructure to disqualify a vendor or continue services with the vendor. As I mentioned earlier, we do have the vendor disqualification standard procedure, as well as NYCHA's first vendor responsibility procedure that lays out the factors for non-responsibility.
Okay. Has NYCHA identified any instances of bid splitting or other abuse of micro-purchase contract policies in the past year? And if so, how did NYCHA respond to that?
Thank you for that question. As a result of the DOI recommendations last year, we have moved to establish what's known as the micro-purchase pre-qualification list. And the properties are required to go through the micro PQL, as we call it, to identify vendors. To my knowledge, I have not been made aware of any bid splitting in the
Right.
past year.
Okay. What is the current status of the Mayor's Action Plan, they call MAP, in NYCHA developments? And if you can give me a dive into how that works with the security apparatus in those senior buildings that are on those developments that have a MAP program.
I'm not aware of any senior buildings that are part of the MAP program. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Well, those senior buildings that are on those that are part of those developments that have a MAP program.
I'd have to get back to you on the senior developments that are part of MAP. I know a little bit about the MAP program and safety and security, but I don't know which developments are necessarily part of the MAP program that are senior.
But are you familiar with the MAP program?
A little bit, yes.
Okay. Are you aware of the developments where there is a MAP program?
Yes.
Okay. Has NYCHA identified any instances of bribery or quid pro quo in awarding contracts in the past year? And if so, how did NYCHA respond to that?
Thank you for the question. To my knowledge, I'm not aware of any instances of bribery and the like in the past year. We work very closely in close partnership with DOI, and we would be, if such information was brought to us, we would be working in close partnership with them to determine next steps.
Okay. How has NYCHA reformed its procurement process to ensure that contractors with histories of poor performance are not awarded new contracts or renewed?
Thank you for that question. We've actually made several reforms to the procurement department, including restructuring, developing new processes, and coming up with standard procedures that have not existed in the past. As I mentioned earlier, the vendor disqualification process, as well as the vendor responsibility procedures, are very robust in terms of identifying what we check in terms of vendor vetting and the actions that are taken as a result of factors that could lead to disqualification. We also have a longstanding non-responsibility and protest resolution procedure that lays out the factors for responsibility as well as responsiveness and how to resolve the protest. All of these efforts related to standard procedures are aimed at really strengthening our vendor base and to ensure that we are working with responsible vendors only. And if I may add, I'd like to also state that the procurement department last year did institute NYCHA's first procurement ethics policy. We've conducted numerous training across developments as well as with our vendors, which is also a prerequisite for getting on the micro-purchase pre-qualification list.
Quality assurance, how is that factored in? I know there's been multiple complaints by residents where contractors, you're getting the same contractors that are doing the same shabby jobs over and over. So how are we ensuring that the quality of the work is there when we're making a determination on whether or not a contractor should be doing business again with the authority?
Thank you for that question. I will speak a little bit on the ability for us to take past prior performance into consideration in selection of vendors, and then I will defer to my colleague to speak about quality assurance. So one of the procedures actually I failed to mention was we are in the process of finalizing vendor performance evaluation. When there is a contract, the user department is required to do a performance evaluation on the vendor, and that information is factored into our vendor responsibility vetting before we award the contract. We're also looking to implement ways in which we can factor this information when we do requests for proposals and take that into consideration as part of the evaluation criteria.
Okay. And you said, yeah.
Could you elaborate on the question regarding quality assurance?
No, I was saying when it comes to how is that factored in making a determination when when a vendor is selected again to do work? Are we looking at the quality of work that was done to as part of making that determination if they will get another contract?
Previously, I would assume,
that's-
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, I asked that question because we on the ground, you don't see that. So I want to kind of understand what's the disconnect, and I think obviously this is also associated with the issues we had with Universal, and this ongoing theft against the NYCHA residents. So I just want to know across the board, how are you dealing with that and making sure quality assurance is factored in when you're given another contract?
So NYCHA during 2022 through 2024 filled out five, what's the appropriate word in your, we did 5 performance evaluations that was submitted to procurement to ensure that if we got future bids from Allied, that would be a factor, and documenting this poor performance helps us to not choose a poor performing vendor in the future.
Okay. When it comes back to engaging and getting feedback from the residents, in 2024, a comptroller report recommended that NYCHA provide residents with a platform for rating their vendors and viewing other residents' reviews. At a hearing before this committee on February 26 of 2025, NYCHA testified that it would implement this recommendation after future consideration. Can you share the status or update us on?
Thank you for that question. The procurement department currently does not have a mechanism to solicit formal feedback from residents, but we like to note that in the case of the current RFP that is out on the street for fire and security guard services, TA leadership input and feedback was incorporated into defining the scope and the requirements. We have engaged in conversations to start the dialogue and how it is that we can capture vendor performance at the point of service.
Do you think that this the recommendation that was made through the comptroller's report, do you think it's needed? Do you think it's important to get feedback from the residents?
Absolutely.
So why is it that you haven't implemented this? This was actually back in February 2020. I mean, February 26, 25 is over a month ago, and now seeing and speaking to residents and the fact that you're constantly hearing where vendors are not doing an adequate job. Why don't you think it's important to have implemented this feedback program, or so tenants can rate the work of these vendors, so we can bring in vendors that are going to provide a quality work for the residents?
Thank you for that question. We believe it's very important, and it is something that we've started to discuss, and we will take this back and continue.
Well, how
to
important
discuss.
is it? Because it seems like nothing's been done.
I believe it's very important to get.
So you
resident
believe feedback from the residents is important?
Yes, I do believe that.
So since you believe that it's important, that means that hopefully in the near future, that you'll put in a ranking system so residents can weigh in and let you know the quality of work they've received.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't hear that,
Oh,
ma'am.
I'm sorry. What was that? I thought you were making a statement.
No, I was making it, but I'm just.
Yes, I said
want you
okay.
to-
Yes,
okay.
thank you.
At the 2019 hearing before this committee, NYCHA spoke about data system improvements to detect bid splitting and other policy violations. Can you say more about these changes and areas where additional changes may be needed?
I apologize, Chair. Would you mind repeating the question?
Can you? Well, I'll do this. Can you walk us through the changes NYCHA has made to its micro purchase contract policies over the past few years, and in response to the 2019 DOI investigation into Matrix Construction and recent federal bribery charges. And connected to that, at a 2019 hearing before this committee, NYCHA spoke about the data system improvements to detect bid splitting and other policy violations. Can you say more about those changes and areas where additional changes may be needed?
Sure. Okay, so thank you for that question. In terms of improvements that have been made to the micro-purchase process, we have established the micro-purchase pre-qualification list known as the PQL. In order for vendors to be placed on the PQL, they have to have an iSupplier registration, which is NYCHA's vendor registration system, have a passport filing with the city's passport system, which requires vendors' representations and disclosures and certifications. They have to have taken anti-bribery training that was conducted by our Procurement Ethics and Vendor Responsibility Department, and then undergo a background check. So there is a rigorous vendor vetting that is required as a result of, in order to be placed on the PQL. We have also updated our micro-purchase it's a micro-purchase template where vendors are required to break down their cost and overhead and profit so that we can itemize and determine the cost reasonableness of their quotes. We've also required rotation of vendors amongst the PQL vendors. And there are, I think, a host of other recommendations that were made and implemented as a result of the DOI recommendations, including hiring of NYCHA's neighborhood contract managers to oversee the micro-purchase process. You refer to a 2019 data. I'm sorry, I was not at NYCHA, and so I'm not aware of that. However, in terms of detecting bid splits, we have also made substantive improvements in our Apex database, which tracks when a vendor is up for vetting. When the aggregated amount of award exceeds $250,000, we work with DOI to receive an investigative memo known as a vendor name check. And we've made substantial improvements there to make sure the appropriate flags are built in there.
At a 2021 hearing before this committee, NYCHA shared that it created a new purchasing and logistics department to help property managers access contracts quickly. Can you say more about the department and if it's been effective so far?
Yes, thank you for that question. That was one of the restructuring that was done in 2021 with the onboarding of the Chief Procurement Officer. We did create a separate unit called Purchasing, Logistics, and Inventory, and they were to be co-located in the development and support the micro-purchasing and other small purchasing efforts. And we believe that the transition has been very helpful.
Okay. In response to the 2024 federal bribery charges, DOI issued 14 recommendations to NYCHA. At a February 2024 hearing before this committee, NYCHA testified that it would implement all 14 recommendations within 1 year. Have all the recommendations been implemented as of today, and if not, why?
Thank you for the question. Yes, all 14 recommendations have been implemented as of today.
And it's Max going to be my last few questions, and it's going to just dive back into some of the work conditions of the security guards and the fire guards. Is it common for NYCHA and also to the shifts coverage? Is it common for NYCHA to rotate the same guards across different properties in the same day?
So NYCHA doesn't oversee where the guards are supposed to report to. That comes from the security guard and fire guard
Is there any
companies.
coordination with the contractors?
Just the shifts. They're the ultimate responsibilities of the contractor to provide the service and the guard at the site that they're supposed to be at.
What oversight is being provided by NYCHA in that sense? Are you paying attention to that? And I think this goes to the fact when we talk about coverage and the gaps that can exist with the shift changes. And making sure that there's that there's a body that
So
proceeds the next person.
my apologies. So in terms of fire guard, which again are required 24/7.
The security.
Well, security, most of the shifts are only 8 hours, so there is no coverage afterwards. Fire guards are where if,
But what about those developments where it's 24-hour security?
so similar to fire guards, security guards, if there's a 24-hour shift on site, if the vendor knows in advance that a guard is going to be either late or there's a no-show, the guard that is currently there is requested to stay to do the additional shift, and if not, it's up to the vendor to find someone to go and replace the guard at the time.
Okay. And are you aware of what the working conditions are when it comes to the fire guards and the security at these NYCHA buildings?
I haven't heard of any poor working conditions from the guard companies.
No, I said, are you aware of what the conditions are?
The conditions are the conditions. It's the being in the building, and there doesn't seem to be any issues.
Okay. Well, I mean, I know that there was one of the recommendations was to provide a podium or some type of, right?
Yes, and we've already
So
implemented
that would be
that.
part of would be part of condition. Am
Sure,
I correct? I mean,
sure.
or if they had a chair.
Yes, yes. So to your point, yes, we have added chairs at all of the security guard sites, and like I mentioned earlier, I think we're 99% done with putting either podium or a security desk at the senior developments.
Do the guards have access to like a charging station, or when it comes to bathroom breaks? Those are provided, am I correct?
I'd have to double check. I don't know. Every layout is different at NYCHA. I don't know if there's electrical in every single building where the guard is supposed to be on post, or for the fire guards who are walking and patrolling the building.
Okay. Would geofencing technology and electronic timekeeping work if the fire guard, if there are guards, they're unable to keep their devices charged? We know that you need a cell phone or to be able to do that type of input. Would there be part of requirement for those guards to have somewhere where they can charge their phones?
I'm not too technologically savvy on the geofencing. I don't know if the app can go offline, if there's no power to it, but we could explore these options when we meet with future vendors at the NYCHA properties.
All right. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
We're going to take a 2-minute break, and then we're going to allow the public to give testimony. And we would encourage NYCHA to stay behind so you can hear back from the residents, the people that pay your salaries. Thank you. We're going to call this committee meeting back from adjournment. And now we're going to move into our public testimony. I'm now open up the hearing for public testimony. I remind members of the public that this is a government proceeding and that the quorum shall be observed at all times. As such, members of the public shall remain silent at all times. The witness table is reserved for people who wish to testify. No video recording or photography is allowed from the witness table. Further, members of the public may not present audio, video recordings as testimony, but may submit transcripts of such recordings to the Sergeant of Arms for inclusion into the hearing record. If you wish to speak at today's hearing, please fill out the appearance card with the Sergeant of Arms and wait to be recognized. When recognized, you will have 2 minutes to speak on today's hearing topic, which is obviously security guards and fire guards and NYCHA's oversight of contractors. If you have a written statement or additional written testimony you wish to submit for the record, please
Yeah, the tenants have a big issue with safety and big issue with safety in the public housing. 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 But the guards have their issues too. Guards go through a lot of hour. They're gonna pay the guards $16 an hour. So if you an hour in a city where you have to make $30 an hour to have be what's called a livable wage. Yeah, they're gonna do all the type of stuff, sleep on the job, abandon their post, walk out on the job. It's something where like you as the chair.
thank you for your testimony.
All right, thank you. I gotta go now.
Can we have Cornisha Conrad? Cornish. Sorry about that. Cazalar Cornish. Please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You may begin your testimony.
Hello, Councilman Banks and everyone else. So I was listening to the testimony, and so they were talking about how many of the security apparatus that they have at the NYCHA buildings are not working. And so I was asking that, will the citizens whose buildings are not working be the first buildings to receive the geofencing, et cetera, in order to plug the security? because obviously if they have security at the other sites that are working, then they don't need the geofencing first. It should be the citizens that have no security at this point because of the broken apparatuses to receive that. Is that in the making for them? Also, something is fundamental that they're saying that the citizens were not able to identify whether or not this was the fire department or the security guard. Something as simple as an identification badge should be able to fix that. Why the people that are working there don't have identification badges so that the people can clearly see significantly that they are workers of this kind or that kind. Simple. Okay. So what committees or voting process is to determine what buildings receive the CCTV? They also said that they check every day to see if the CCTV is working, but not if the guards are actually on post or securing the perimeters of the building. She testified that, every day they check to see if the cameras are working. And that's it, as if, they just want to make sure that the apparatuses are working, but not if the people that are working in those perimeters that... Okay.
30 seconds to wrap it up.
Thank you. So also fire and security solicitations, basically that means that they're soliciting for people to take these positions. Is that something that's being made known to the public? Because these are jobs that are available. And we'd also like to know if it's possible for these people who are in the tenants associations, that they may be able to get those jobs inside of their areas and work in their areas because they have a vested interest in making sure that these things are secure and safety for their families as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now turn to remote testimony. Once your name is called, a member of our staff will unmute you, and the Sergeant of Arms will give you the go-ahead to begin. Please wait for the Sergeant to announce that you may begin before delivering your testimony. We have Renee Keith.
Time starts now.
Okay.
Renee, you may begin your testimony.
Okay. I'm actually the Resident Association President of the Elliott Chelsea Houses. I come today with deep concern, frustration, and a call for accountability. FJC Security, also known as Allied Universal, has long provided security and fire watch guards at public housing developments. Most recently, they had been awarded $76 million contract in 2019, a contract that is now ballooned to $155 million. On top of that, FJC holds a separate $6.5 million contract with the mayor's office. We need this to stop, and it has. This practice has gone on for years, and it continues. We are back again, demanding transparency, oversight, and resident engagement, something mandated under HUD's 964 regulations, as Mr. Martinez has stated. NYCHA has failed to enforce contractual obligations and has not demanded a return of funds where contractors have not complied. Why has there been no public process for recovery of the money they were overcharged, like in the case of the now infamous $700 light bulb scandal? NYCHA repeatedly claims it lacks funding. If that's the case, they should be ensuring every dollar is spent wisely. Instead, we see waste, poor oversight, and decisions that erode public trust. We are tired. We continue to face NYCHA's failures in its most basic responsibility, to manage and protect public housing and its residents. It feels intentional. It feels like they are trying to destroy this prime housing stock, to hand it over to developers. Who is ensuring that recommendations NYCHA claims have accepted are actually being implemented? Is this under the purview of the federal monitor? If not, it should be. There must be penalties written into the executive leadership contracts. If this is about money and funding, then failure must come with consequences. NYCHA has over 300 lawyers at a cost of $50 million. Surely someone can revise a contract to hold vendors accountable. This is inexcusable. This is shameful. These officials are sworn in. If they lie, what is the penalty? If one exists, it must be enforced. Security should not
Time
be used as
expired.
a tool to push
30
conversion.
seconds to wrap it up.
We call for a moratorium on PAC. NYCHA's claim that security is now needed is no longer paid $70 million. That was Eric Botcher, paid $70 million to NYPD, raises deeper issues about representation. We are taxpayers. We already pay for the NYPD. To be forced to pay again for services others receive through public funding is double taxation. NYCHA needs a revolution of advocacy, of honest resident engagement, of sustained reinvestment, and continued maintenance. We need real solutions, real accountability. Respect for our communities. Thank you.
Dollars in capital funds since 2019 and projected another $600 million from 2023 to 2042. But yet it's OSHA regulations, water, air quality when remediating lead and other issues for my apartment and countless other residents as well. We have also incurred ailments, illnesses, and health conditions that can't be treated or untreated. As you know, Beth Israel's hospital is closed. There's over 71 and counting residents at Reese alone whose quality of life is violated. Their gross negligence has cost people their lives. Imagine the atrocities at the other developments. Unlocking funds for NYCHA should not be at the tenant's detriment. Collect the fines, investigate passport invoices, NYCHA staff and contractors as to why gross mismanagement is afoot. Protect, inform, and comply with the 964 regs. Reese beat PAC scorecard, section 9, 667 to PAC 371. Game over. I say this to give hope to those residents and developments who are in elections and undergoing conversion. United we stand and divided we fall. Preserve public housing and save section 9. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony and your strong advocacy. This ends the end of the testimony. If we have inadvertently missed anyone that has registered to testify today and has yet to be have been called, please use the Zoom to raise your hand function if you are testifying remotely, and you will be called in the order that your hand has been raised. If you are testifying in person, please come to the dais. Seeing none, I will now close this hearing. I thank you to the members of the administration and the members of the public who have joined us today to discuss this very important topic. This hearing is adjourned.